Hello, everybody. You are back with us, and we have a guest today. I'll get to him in a minute. But David, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Doing real good. Yeah.
Yep.
Looking forward to what is this, episode 4?
5.
5?
We've had 5.
Holy
This will be
Moses,
fifth.
time flies.
Number 5.
Okay.
Yeah, she's a beauty. That number 5. Hey, so we've got a friend. I've got a friend. David's never met him, but I've known this guy for like 35 years. Knew him from church stuff. I used to be a youth pastor. Steve was a youth pastor. We both got kicked out, so that's good. That's why we like each other. Um, but Steve has never been to Boston, and I just thought it'd be a good idea to have somebody on that has heard a lot about Boston, the persona of Boston people, Bostonians, and that kind of thing, and give us his perspective of kind of what he sees from movies. I know he likes all the Boston movies, Good Will Hunting and The Town and all that. So Steve, give us an idea first of all of what the perception. What do you think the perception is of Bostonians just from a Midwest point of view?
Right on. Well, I'm not even in the Midwest anymore. I'm out on the West Coast in the Seattle area.
That's
Let
right.
me say that it is an honor to be a part of this podcast and be a part of you guys and to finally meet the legend, David Donahue. I've heard so much about
Let me just say, any friend of my brother's is a suspect of mine, but keep going.
right. And I love what you guys are doing with this podcast. I love it. I just think it's so great talking about Boston, reuniting after all these years, and even including the vulnerabilities of what you guys have gone through.
Right.
And I love that. There's not a lot of guys out there, particularly guys, let alone humans, but there's not a lot of people out there that are willing to be so vulnerable as you guys are. And I think it helps a lot of people. And I don't know if it's helping you as well. But anyway, thanks for letting me be on. I can't believe I'm in front of a couple of Boston boys. I just need to know what's the deal with the baked beans. I mean, really, of all the things that you'd want to put on the map, why would they? Hey, try our baked beans. Is it because it's a triple B? I mean, what is the deal with the Boston?
I think there was some contest like in the 1700s
Okay.
for like the bean pot and the the molasses, and I'm not sure if baked beans originated here, or what do you know about that, Mike?
I don't know anything about that. I know that it's a big part. Like the hockey tournament, it's called the Bean Pot.
Right.
With all the colleges.
Franks and beans on Saturday night, like clockwork, right?
Right.
Really?
We had a neighbor.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Saturdays, Franks and
Harold
beans
Trask every
and
Saturday
brown
night.
bread.
Yeah. Yeah, we're gonna do a whole segment on him sometime.
Right.
Crazy that a pet raccoon.
That's what I love.
I
want to do a segment on it now. When you get into stories about all the guys from the past, that's when you have me riveted. I just love listening to guys fire off about that.
So
They're real people.
So what is
I
the
know.
perception, Steve? Like when you go, okay, what do you think people on the that are not from Boston think of us?
Well, I'm afraid because if my perception is real, they get to come after me. Gonna hit the mattresses.
No, that's real. Yeah.
Yeah.
Be afraid. Be very afraid.
One reason I love being on this podcast, this episode with you guys so much is because, like you said, I've never been there. I've always wanted to go there. I love it when the Boston Red Sox finally beat the Yankees. I'm a Mariners boy myself, and so I don't like the Yankee like the rest of the country, except for a few. I mean, anyway, I love the movies. I love Boston. I love the whole Boston. I love and I remember watching, which one was it? Was it The Fighter with Mark Wahlberg and Christian Bale, right? And Mike goes, no, that's how it was in my neighborhood, how the women act. Is that really true? I mean, in that movie, how they
Did you see that movie,
punch
Dave?
each other in the face.
No, I didn't see that movie.
And some D Street girls, some basically some tough kids, and
Oh, yeah.
they got into a fight. The girls
Okay.
did. And,
Vicious, right?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Pulling
Right.
hair. I mean,
No, dead on. Yeah, dead on. Yeah.
David, tell me about the D Street girls. I want to hear about the D Street girls.
Okay. So I actually I had an assistant that was a D Street girl. She
Okay.
worked with me when I was in property management. She was, so I was with her at Home Depot one time. We were picking up some supplies or something like that, and out from Home Depot walks Kevin Weeks. Now Kevin Weeks is Whitey Bulger's like right hand man, and they greeted each other like they were long lost, siblings. They were like, "Hey Kevin, how you doing?" I mean, these are like the Goombas from Southie, like Whitey's crew, and that was like a Tuesday, and she was a piece of work.
Wow.
Total piece of work. I loved her, but I'll never forget. I was in court, and it was a big trial. It had something to do with my profession, and this lawyer was vaudeering me and trying to get me to admit some things, and then she got on the stand, and they were asking her the same questions about my disposition and me being sort of like a in your face property manager. And it was in relation to the parties that were suing us. Like I was treating them differently, and just out of the mouths of babes, she goes, "Oh no, he's like that with everybody. He's an ecumenical asshole to everybody." So, and it was so sincere because of and genuine. Even the judge had to smirk.
So asshole was like a compliment.
Right. Oh no, he's like that with everybody. Right. Yeah. Was right out of D Street. No finesse, no nothing. Right.
Yeah. Like some of those movies, they pulled, instead of getting actors out of the Actors Guild, they pulled some of those kids right out of D Street. Like that opening scene of Good Will Hunting, when she goes, I love that when she goes, "Go home and give it a tug yourself." Like.
Right. Oh yeah.
Yeah. That's the kind of stuff that we heard growing up. Like.
Right.
And then David, talk about so Steve, what happened in the 70s was there was a big busing deal. Basically, they were busing minorities into South Boston and vice versa. They were trying to be equitable about, the education and that kind of thing. So it became a big deal. It was if you Google it, there's there's movies on it, there's documentaries. It ended up being a flop, but literally thousands of people moved out of the inner city of Boston into the suburbs to get away from having to be forced to do that. And so we got these white flighters, they call them, coming from Southie. We're only 10 minutes away, but we were the suburbs, and they came into the area, and man, it was a big difference. Like they looked like us because they had Bruins hats on and Red Sox shirts or whatever, but man, what a difference, right, Dave?
They didn't act like us at all. These were, it's funny because they came in to sort of acclimate with other white people. And this was like a place that they could afford, sort of a blue collar neighborhood. And they didn't assimilate with us. They were different. They were city kids. They were angry. Their language was different. And they were clannish. And there was 10 of them to a 2-bedroom shack, and yeah, they were just, mean spirited. I remember that one guy. I was doing so this old time Southie dude moves into the area, and I was doing some landscape for him. I was about 11, 12 years old, not even. So I'm walking by one day, and he goes, "Come here, you little," like, and that was their vernacular. I had to go home and ask you what that meant. That's how they, I don't know if you can edit that out, Mike, but that just kind of I'll never forget that. I'm like, huh? It was their everyday, vernacular.
When they got in fights, it was like a crime scene. I mean, it was
right.
Like they would just, it was not like we would get in fights.
Right.
And it would, you work it out, you get a couple punches in there. No, they were mopping the floor with you. I mean, they were angry. Like you said, they had a lot of anger.
Oh yeah.
Going
on. They were clannish, and I think the irony is that they came out here to feel at home, and they never did feel at home.
Big difference. Yeah.
Right. But I remember them moving in all the time.
And the odds of Mike editing that out of there are about as much as a bank robber giving up the keys, the combination to the vault.
I didn't say it, so we'll leave it in there.
It was like the pinnacle of, this is like this, little old guy. Come here, you little bit, Yeah. I'm just like, huh?
And some of the grandmothers, like some of the older women too, they had cigarettes. They had a cigarette in their face. Yeah, it was like, come here, you bastard. And everybody's a bastard back in Boston. Like, and that's a term of endearment. You know what I mean? Come here, grandma, you bastard.
Son of a bitch.
Yeah, what's that?
Son of a bitch.
Yeah,
See, there's a couple B words that Boston is known for, not baked beans. You know what I'm talking about?
yeah, bitch and
I think one
bastard.
thing that, kind of really, like, Mike and I've always been friends, but one thing that my respect went up a whole notch is when I was talking to you one day, Mike, and we are talking about some of those movies, and you're like, no, that was my life. And I'm like, there's no way. For real? I mean, it was like I'm living in the movie just talking to you. That's why I'm enjoying these episodes with you guys so much as you tell the stories, because you lived what the movies are trying to
We
portray.
walk the walk. Yeah.
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 Man. And so my hat goes off to you. You're survivors. You are still here, man. And I love the stuff you've been talking to, David, about how, you know, you're 60 years old now, or whatever it is you are up in there. But you feel like you're working on getting healthier and getting beyond all this stuff and be able to talk about it, which I think helps. But I mean, my respect goes off to both of you guys to grow up in the environment that you grew up in. And I know that even some of the stories that you've told me, Mike, that haven't been on your episodes yet are just, man, my hat goes off to you. But to answer your question that I still haven't answered yet, I guess one of the things that we learned in the Midwest about Boston was, and I think it's because you guys ever heard of the Midwest Nice? You know, the Minnesota Nice, right?
Yep.
Everyone is always, nice, but they talk nice. They're not always feeling it inside. What we heard, in the Midwest, we talked about the East Coast and Boston, is that everybody is rude out there. But I'm wondering if it isn't more, you guys were you didn't have the Minnesota Nice. You're not going to play around and act super nice. You're just going to be real, but that's what we heard, that you guys are all mean and rude out there.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely, some authenticity that doesn't get watered down here. And so, like I said, it just becomes part of the vernacular, like those people from South Boston that were, communicating with one another. It's just this raw, yeah, that's the only way I can describe it. It's just a raw authenticity.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think for me, when I left Boston, grew up there 19 years, and then went in the military and landed in the Midwest, it was a shock. You know how people were so nice to each other. They wave at each other and stuff. They're going down the road. I mean, here in Boston, if you waved at somebody going on the road, they would think you were your
What?
meds. You know what I mean?
What are you looking at?
Yeah. What do you? Yeah, they'd follow you to your house. What, you were looking at me? Like, you just keep straight. You don't look at me in the eye. You just keep going. So I get out here and people are like, "Hi, y'all." You know, they're all nice to me, and I'm like, "What do you want?" You know. So I had to get used to that.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is with Boston area? Why you guys just that raw authenticity? What is there something that you can think of that makes you guys like that?
Poverty.
Is there a lot of poverty out there?
Yeah. So we grew up in this, lower working class area where, the main industry right around where we lived was a shipyard. So everybody worked at the yard. So there were, as many churches as there were bar rooms, kind of thing. So, yeah, that's sort of where I think where some of that comes from. This sort of no nonsense.
Yeah, and getting raised hard. Like
Hard,
those guys were our grandfathers and our fathers. They were mean. They were tough. They were, they go to work every day, but then they would, like David said, they'd be at the bar. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And we remember like neighborhood guys just getting away. There was a cultural permission. We talked about that last time we were but there was a cultural permission for a lot of things, like a lot of just treating kids bad and treating their wives bad. I remember
misogyny. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Huge. Like, you would see women come running out the door with, their husbands chasing them or throwing something at them or
Not
whatever.
uncommon. Yeah.
Yeah. It was like, oh, that was Tuesday. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't,
right.
Now you'd gather around and go, oh my God, what, are they doing an intervention?
I think that
like,
grew with the South Boston influx. Where there'd be the mother would always have a black eye and the old man was just slugging down a Schlitz. It was that kind of neighborhood, right?
Can we call this episode "Slugging Down a Schlitz"?
Slugging down a Schlitz.
Man, I haven't heard that word Schlitz for so long, dude. Do they still make that?
I don't think so. It was a beverage of choice, though, in our neighborhood, right?
Oh yeah, that was my first beer I ever drank.
Was it?
Right? We got a 6-pack of Talls. Yeah.
Just like your old man, you son of a.
You
Yeah. That was,
bastard.
you bastard. Dirty bastard. Um,
Oh man, you just ain't pissing on Plymouth Rock. That's what I'm saying.
but David, I told him of the time that I think it
No,
was,
it was in one of your episodes where David called you out and you looked like for the first time like you got oops, I don't want him to tell that story. Where one of your friends got in trouble for peeing on
Right.
the Plymouth Rock.
Yeah.
oh,
Who pees on Plymouth Rock?
yeah, like desecrating the holy
The
ground.
thing that represents we discovered America, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people peeing on Plymouth Rock these days too. Just they're not getting busted for it. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
So to get back to what you were talking about earlier, I think that these Mike and I have dialogued for over a couple of years now. We've really got together and become brothers. I said before in this podcast that we grew up in the same house, but we didn't grow up together, and I think this gives us an opportunity to kind of grow up together. I know that I can speak for myself that diving into some of these subjects, Mike and I are a lot closer than we've ever been. And it's a genuine closeness. It's not, it's not conditional. And that's how I feel about it. Right.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Yeah.
And I don't want to get too whatever serious or preachy whatever here, but I and maybe you guys correct me if I'm wrong here or get your input on this, but I think one we struggle, especially as men, a lot of times talking about the real stuff, the real guts of what we're going through, or our pain, or our hurt, or our anger, or whatever. And you and Mike have been talking so raw and vulnerable. It's funny because, like you said, a lot of people in Boston are raw and vulnerable, but they're not really going to talk about that vulnerable. They're not going to go down that deep. And I'm wondering if one reason why you guys are so tight is because you have just been okay with talking about the pain and the anger and the angst and all that crap that you went through. And I wonder if that has bonded you together as men, as bros.
It has, and people have mentioned the the kind of allure to these podcasts that we're not really cognizant of, but it's there. Like two brothers, kind of throwing them down and calling it like it is a novel thing, and that's just my brother Mike. That's how I look at it. Right.
Yeah, and I think for me, like David said it last week, you're my only witness, right? Like David's a witness to what happened to me, and for me. Because of my role in the family, because I was a scapegoat, there was a lot of arrows pointed towards me. Like that's my fault because the family was goofed up, and I was 5, so it there's no way it could have been. But David has been really good for me. Our reconnection has been really good for me because I all the time I knew that I wasn't perfect. I'm not saying that. I mean, I did a lot of bad things, but I wasn't the center of why it was bad. And I was treated that way. And with David him and I, kind of comparing notes now and going, oh, wait, you had your role, I had my role. Those roles were just forced upon us. And being able to like dissect that and talk about that has been really healthy for me. It's been great for me personally.
Love it. I have another question I want to ask you guys, but before I do, I just want to tag on real quick. I can't speak for David here because I don't know with him, but I want to let everyone else know that's watching and listening. I mean, you guys talk a lot about the trauma that your mom she was something, man. The trauma that she created and lived in, and yet you guys always talked about her with respect on the program. I love, David, how you talk about how it didn't start with her. I mean, it started way back to the Mayflower. You guys need to check some older episodes where they're talking about. I mean, David has traced their family line down to their 9th grade grandmother, what it was born on the Mayflower, correct?
The first booze cruise.
the first Donahue booze cruise. Yeah.
If the Appletons or Donahues are on it, and it was a booze cruise.
But I want to say that I know that Mike still flies out to Boston to hang out with mom, and I've been with Mike. When mom calls, no matter where we're at with our conversation, Mike stops and he talks to his mom and he treats her with respect. And I think that is unbelievable to me.
We've had to put up some boundaries lately because of some dysfunction with her, but it's the same thing. I mean, it's still a respect because she is a human. She deserves value. She's valuable, in the universe, but but as far as interacting with her, it's gotten tougher lately. So
She doesn't have a filter anymore. Now that she's, getting older, there's no nuance, there's no subtlety to some of the stuff. So Michael and I have been, dealing with that. Um, but so next week we're going to talk about some of that ancestry, and people. I always hear when people say, she did the best that she could. I don't believe that. I believe that it couldn't have turned out any differently given the set of circumstances and facts. Stuff that she went through was much, in some level, much worse than what we went through, and she only brought along the tools that she was given. And so you can say that about her mother and so on and so forth. So Michael and I are going to unpack that next week with the ancestry stuff, right?
Yeah, because one of the things I say in schools, and Steve, you've heard me say it, is hurt people hurt people. It's like that progression that keeps going down, but there's a pause between those two statements, right? So hurt people, pause, hurt people. That pause is important, right? If you get help for your hurt, then you don't automatically have to pass that on. But my mom just never got help, and it would have been a lot for her to get help. Back in the day, it wasn't as available as it is now, right? So even us in our 60s, we can get help. I know where to go to get help. If they didn't have any help. I mean, they just didn't. They just nobody talked about it.
Just saying it out loud is just the first step, and
right.
Yeah. So,
and if you went to go get help, they called him a shrink. Right? They called it was a negative terminology. Oh, you want to see a shrink? Like there's something wrong with you.
Right.
Thank God that now today it's a different matter. I mean, people they want to go get therapy. They want to go get counsel because we need that. We have to have that. But that's a podcast right there, Mike. I mean, hurt people, but there's a pause in there. What do you do in that pause, right? If you don't pause, if you don't think about, I've been hurt, let's deal with this. And if you don't pause with that, then you're just going to immediately hurt people. That pause is huge, man.
Yeah. Yeah. And David's paused. Like David has gotten help. I've gotten help, and we're still getting help. But I mean, that's the issue. Do you have the guts enough to stop and look at your life? Because some part of that pause is looking at your own life. I had to look at the fact that I did carry some of that on, and I did, make some mistakes with my mom and with David, actually, growing up, and having to own that and face that. And it's not easy. It sucks, but you got to do it.
Yeah. And I'm, Mike, with some of the dialogue that we've had and some of the remorse that you've had about certain things that went on in the past, I constantly have to remind him that he was a child, that he was, below the age of 18. There's a number out there for a reason. Scientifically, you're not responsible. You don't have the cognitive ability to make, prudent decisions or whatever. So, Mike takes on a lot, and, I try to remind him that, nobody's holding him accountable for anything that happened when he was 5. Right. So, and I know sometimes he does. And that, when I see that happening, it breaks my heart and it pisses me off, because I'm sort of like, Mike, you don't need to own this. Right.
And I love that relationship you have as the younger brother to your older brother, because Mike's a dear friend of mine and we've been through a lot of stuff together.
Yeah.
And when I see you encouraging him like that from the guy that tasted the same thing that he tasted, right? That has to mean a lot to Mike. And you're right. I mean, when you're emancipated at 14 years old, living on your own at 15 years old, whatever it was, I can't even imagine. I think maybe that's another reason why I'm kind of enamored by a lot of those movies and Black Mass and, Gone Baby Girl or whatever that movie was with Casey Affleck and all that stuff. Because I love prison movies too. I don't understand how people survive trauma like that. And I talk about sometimes, and Mike, you've trained me, right? Don't measure your pain. There's another way that you worded that, but don't measure your pain. Pain.
Don't scale it.
Don't scale it, right?
Yeah.
Pain is pain. But when I look at what you guys have been through, when I hear Mike's stories, and then when I read your book, Mike, Groomed, oh my word, you guys should read 2 books. You should read his Reinventing My Normal and his Groom book. Pull those up. Do you have them right there? There's Groom, and you have Reinvent My Normal there too?
No.
Anyway, they both, reason I like Mike, I think you've written like 4 books, right?
5.
5. Okay.
But
If you
who's
want to be
counting?
technical.
But I like the, yeah. But who's counting, right?
But who's counting?
But the thing I like about those 2 books is those books are more autobiographical. You're talking about your story in those books, and when you tell your story in those books, every one of us can relate to that. I think that's one reason why I like these Boston movies, is because I'm like, how in the world do people survive living like that? Because I was a sheltered Midwest. I mean, I had
You
everything.
were from the square states.
I was from the square states. You're exactly right. You know.
Yeah.
So my other question for you is this: is it Southeast? What are you guys called? What do they call you growing up? Was it Southeast? Am I getting it wrong?
Yeah.
Someone from South
No,
Boston.
you're from Southeast. So the thing you need to know about Boston geography, like if you're still within 30 miles, you're from Boston. So we grew up in a town called Weymouth, but we're still from Boston. So that's sort of how that goes. A lot of the designation in Boston was what parish are you from? So and some of the old timers still talk. She's from the East Parish and this parish and that parish, Saint Matthew, Saint this, Saint that. The Catholic Church played a big role in our area. There was a compound at the bottom of the hill where we lived that catered to. There was a grade 1 through 12 private school, and then the huge church. And Mike and I always talk about the morality of the bell ringing on the hour every hour, basically saying,
Get in line.
step in line.
Get in line. Line up.
Get in line.
Right,
You're
right,
blowing it.
right.
Just kidding. Yeah, that was a weird. And then wasn't there a convent, like a nunnery?
Something, yeah.
There were a bunch
Now
of
that you
weirdo
mention it,
nuns
yeah.
that were
And they were
buzzing around there all the
mean
time.
ladies.
Yeah,
Remember?
I got my ass handed to me one time by a nun because I faked like I was a dog. I mean, I felt like I was a blind guy with a dog. I brought Rocky in, and I was walking into like catechism class, and oh man, she grabbed me by the ear and beat me all the way to the office. That was crazy.
That sounds like you, Mike.
Yeah, that was Sacred Heart Church. That was crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well, Steve,
I would
thanks
like
for
to hear before we go and whatever else you want to do with the podcast, but I'd like to hear David's, because Mike always tells me how funny his brother is, and so I've been looking forward to meeting you for a long time, not just because of that, but because of the other things that we mentioned as well.
right.
But what's your guys's? Give me one of your funniest stories, or one of you talked about your mom's boyfriends. You've talked about your neighbors. I know there's more there because I've talked with Mike and I've read Mike's books. I'm telling you what. By the way, how can they get your books, Mike? Because they are worth the read.
I'll put it in the
Excellent.
notes.
Okay,
Yeah.
but I would like from you guys to hear your funniest story or your most memorable story that just blows your mind. Like, how could a person be like that? I know that's tough to throw you on the mark so fast like that. Like, just put it right in front of you. But
Harold.
Well, I just like, I like we were hustlers. Like that in the last segment, Michael talked about, asking our mom's boyfriend if we could wash the car. We always had paper routes. We would sell everything. Pussy willows. We'd go pick, pussy willows in the spring and go door to door. And who's not going to pay me a quarter for that? I'm like 8 years old, right?
so you're hustling at 8 and 10 years old. Is that what you're trying to tell me?
No, yeah, we were totally out there. The one thing I will mention about Mike is that he gave me his paper route and then collected after he had given it to me. So I'm knocking on the doors, and they're like, "I paid your brother already." I'm like, "Well, it's not his route anymore." Got you there, huh?
I totally forgot about
That was the Globe, right? The Globe.
Yeah. I thought it was a ledger. I don't know. So my story is I was selling oregano, passing it off as pot. And I just get my mom's oregano and I'd roll it up and I'd sell it to like younger kids. And this guy, it was like a Hell's Angel dad. So the dad of this kid comes up to the house. He's about to like cut my throat, and I had to give him the money back. And yeah, that was a bad day.
Dude, not thinking through that one real clear. I suppose at 12 or whatever you were at that age, you probably weren't thinking. But I mean, the person you're selling the oregano to, passing it off as pot, when they find out it's not pot.
The dad knew.
Well, and they go to the dad, so that tells you all you need to know about the neighborhood, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
Dad, this guy just sold me some fake weed. I'll kick his ass, right?
yeah. Next thing you know, he's at the
Were
door.
dads not afraid to? They didn't care what age you were; they would just give it to you.
Oh yeah, we
Oh
get
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I mean, that wasn't.
Right.
They didn't care about anything like that then. So you saw. We were talking about this. That you saw people getting their women getting beat up.
You learn to
know.
duck. You learn to duck.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right.
You
Right.
learn
Yeah.
to duck.
Yeah.
Oh my.
Yeah.
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 You
Right.
had your head on a swivel. You knew who you could trust and who you couldn't.
And you knew it
We can go
within a
down the neighborhood right
nanosecond.
now. David and I go down the neighborhood right now on a scale of 1 to 10 and go 10. Do you trust this guy? 1, do you don't? And we could just give him a number, and both of us would probably be accurate.
Dead on.
Yeah,
Right.
Wow.
because you had to be. You had to
Right.
know who was dangerous and who's nothing. We had this guy that used to walk. We used to call him Walking John. He was always shit-faced,
Bad
or
alcoholic.
drunk. He was always drunk, and he would walk up the hill, and we would go through his clothes and look for change. As he was coming up the hill, we just go, "Hey, John, how you doing?" And we start reaching into his pocket,
Shaking them down.
shaking him down. And he was like not dating, but he was like shacking up with an old
Mrs.
lady
Slattery.
that was in town. We don't want to use names, but he was shaking it.
Mike, she's dead 25 years now at least.
Okay, okay. Yeah, I mean, basically, yeah, he was shacking up with her, and yeah, it was just a crazy. It was like the wild, wild west.
Was, yeah.
Wow.
That's a good way to put it, right?
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
So-
the wild, wild east. So,
Wow.
well, Steve, thanks for coming on. Appreciate
Thank you,
your
Steve. My pleasure.
having
Nice to
me.
meet you.
time,
Same here.
Davo. Love you, man.
Love you too, brother.
We'll see you guys next week. We're going to be
Thanks,
talking
guys.
about ancestry. We're going to go back into the original Booze Crew,
Chicken
the
Fate.
Mayflower,
Back to the past. Right.
to the-
Yep.
Back to the Future.
Yep.
All
Yep.
right.
Okay. Ciao for now.